Members, we're going to have an morning order in the afternoon. Our guest has not arrived this morning, so I'm going to invite Representative Ray Martinez to come to the well and some friends. Members will give him your attention, please. And friends.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and colleagues, today we celebrate Georgia-Canada Day at the Capitol. That's right. Georgia, Canada is the #1 export and has been over for 20 years. Georgia exported $7.4 billion in goods to Canada, with plastic articles being the #1 export. Georgia imported $6.5 billion in goods from Canada, with the #1 export being engines and turbines. There are over 300 Canadian-owned businesses in Georgia, employing 33,000 Georgians. Most notable Canadian countries is CAE, an aerial space company. On Gulfstream's campus in Savannah, West Fraser, a British Columbia-based lumber producer within 2 mills in Georgia, and Cantor in lumber and producer with 3 facilities in Georgia, including a southern headquarters in Moultrie, Georgia. In 2024, trade between Georgia and Canada was at $13.9 billion, making Georgia the #1 state in the Southeast with trade with Canada. With us here today is Canada Consul General Michelle Kwan and her staff. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now lead the well. Thank you.
Members, help the gentleman and myself and you all welcome our visitors and our partners from Canada. The Consul General's up here, so if you will, rise and let's give them a good Southern welcome to the great state of Georgia from the great country of Canada. Members, we'll get back on the rules calendar. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Resolution 622?
Senate Resolution 622 by Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd and others, a resolution creating the Joint Study Committee on evaluating escalating costs in Georgia's foster care system. This resolution having been assigned to the Committee on Juvenile Justice, that committee recommends that this resolution be adopted.
Representative Beth Camp is recognized to present Senate Resolution 622. Chair ladies recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. This is a joint study committee between the Senate and the House. And this is to facilitate a study committee to try to determine why the escalating cost of children in foster care has happened. Since 2022, the costs have escalated 159%. It costs more to house these kids, we know that, but we need to drill down and find out exactly how we can handle this more efficiently and make sure that the 10,000 children that are in foster care in our state get the services they need. Mr. Speaker, I'm open for any questions.
Lady has a question. Representative Buckner to your left is recognized for a question.
Does the gentlelady yield?
I do.
Will this House study take into account that we have had lower per diem rates for our caregivers than the rest of the country at a very high rate, much lower, and we have a lot of the numbers that we're using we're basing our number of kids in foster care and the amount of money being spent is based on population numbers that were when we were 4 million people in the state of Georgia, and now we're 11. So the fact that there's an increased number of kids in the system and inflation, and that we're already at a very low rate, I hope will all be considered in this study committee.
Thank you, Representative Buckner. They most definitely will be. The number of providers that we have available, where they're available, transportation factors in when we don't have providers available to children in DFAC's custody. All those will be taken into account. I had a joint committee hearing with Chairman Dempsey back in December, and those were some of the issues that were brought forth, which is part of the reason why we are moving forward with a full study committee, so we can uncover all the issues that factor in.
Lady, yield for one more question.
Yes.
Will it also be included in this study committee that when the foster children are moved around, that we have a new system where the information about those children arrives before the child as they're moved across the state? Many times when children are moved from, say, Savannah to Columbus, their school and medical records don't get there until several weeks after they have arrived.
Well, most assuredly, Senator Kirkpatrick also has a bill that I'm hopeful we will be hearing that moves forward with ensuring those children are enrolled within 3 days, as stipulated in federal law in the ESSA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lady has no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask for favorable consideration of the members, and I yield the well.
Lady has yielded the will. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? Hearing none, the previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill, to the adoption of the resolution? Hearing none, the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And Mr. Clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? All members voted. If so, Mr. Clerk will lock the machine.
Right now. Yes, sir.
On the adoption of Senate Resolution 622, the yeas are 165, the nays are 0, and this resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Members, we do have a supplemental local calendar. Let's go ahead and take it up and get it out of the way too. So now we have third reading and passage of this one uncontested local bill. If there's no objection, obviously we will vote on the local calendar as a whole with a recorded vote. Since it's only one, that makes sense to me. Hearing none, it is so ordered. Mr. Clerk, will you read the local calendar?
House Bill 1567 by substitute by Representative LaHood of the 175th City Equipment. House Bill 1567 provides for a referendum on consolidating the city equipment with Brooks County.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered on the local calendar? Hearing none, the previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? Hearing none, the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill on the local calendar will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And Mr. Clerk will unlock the machines. All members voted? All members voted. If so, all members voted. If so, Mr. Clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of the supplemental local calendar, yeas are 96 and nays are 68. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill? Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 547?
Senate Bill 547 by Senator Strickland of the 42nd, to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 16.613 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to penalties for violating Code Section 16.69 through 16.612 so as to modify the penalties for the offenses of pimping and pandering. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Judiciary Non-Civil. That committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Representative Tyler Paul Smith is recognized to present SB 547. Give the gentleman the will your attention, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of this most august and learned body, I bring to you Senate Bill 547. This will be one of the more simple bills you see here today. Traditionally, current law treats the offenses of pimping and pandering as misdemeanors. Simply, this bill would make both pimping and pandering felonies punishable by imprisonment for 1 to 10 years, regardless of whether that was the first offense. Whereas currently we make a first offense a misdemeanor, now it is a felony. Ladies and gentlemen of this body, I would tell you that with the big world events that are coming to our state here within the year, that the likelihood of these offenses being committed are substantially increased. Now is the time for this body to stand and make sure that we deliver a message that our state will not tolerate this sort of behavior of those preying on the most innocent among us. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield for questions if there are any.
Gentleman has a couple of questions. Representative Nisa Jones, to your left, is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Thank you so much for this bill. I do have a question. Given that sex trafficking remains a major concern and issue for the state of Georgia, impacting vulnerable children and families across communities, isn't it true that we could send a clear and immediate message of zero tolerance for those who exploit human life for profit by being strict from the onset rather than escalating over time?
I think this bill accomplishes that very goal that you had stated.
Representative Jasmine Clark, to your left, is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Of course.
So I know we use the phrase pimping and pandering often in here. Can you actually define pandering?
Yes, if you will look at that, it's akin to sexual solicitation in a way, but not quite to that purpose. Pandering is very similar to that, and so it's not quite to the solicitation. I know that the gentlelady is very learned, and so if you'll look within the code section there, pandering will actually be found in OCGA 16-6-12.
12. Okay. Does the gentleman further yield?
And one more.
Does this also pertain to activities that happen online? Like, for example, the way people sometimes use social media to solicit or, quote, pander, or other media outside of, I guess, what a lot of people traditionally think of when they think of pimping and pandering?
I think you'd have to look at the end result. Several hypotheticals in mind. I could see where it would lead to the end result. I'd have to lead you to the case law to see whether we've had cases such as that. I'm sure that a pimping charge that has been levied before would have started online. I would not be surprised by that. I know that pandering cases have in the past.
All right. Thank you.
With that, Mr. Speaker, if there's no other
You have no further questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll yield well and ask this body's favorable consideration.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? Hearing none, the previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? Hearing none, the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And Mr. Clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? It's frozen. I thought you meant your machine was frozen. Have all members voted? If so, Mr. Clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of Senate Bill 547, the yeas are 166, the nays are 2. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 430.
Senate Bill 430 by Senator Robertson, the 29th, to be entitled an act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 13 entitled 4080 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated relating to excise tax on rooms, lodgings, and accommodations. This bill has been referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chairman Ron Stevens is recognized to present Senate Bill 430.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, Senate Bill 430 is a committee substitute that was introduced to make it clear that military museums will be eligible for hotel-motel tax revenue. It was not clear before. We substituted our language in the Senate bill, House Bill 1179, to protect destination marketing organizations from waste, fraud, and abuse. Hotel-motel taxes are collected by local governments. The local government takes half. Then the local governments contract with the DMO marketing organization to promote tourism for the purpose of putting heads in beds. DMOs, destination marketing organizations, are private nonprofits, sometimes affiliated with your local chambers of commerce, dedicated for one thing, and that's to advertise tourism to get folks there. What this bill does with the Hotel Motel Tax Performance Review Board, which sits under DCA, allows the board to review complaints about changes to DMOs. Mr. Speaker, that's what the bill does. I want to just take a moment to thank former Representative Richard Smith. This will help his museum and the minority leaders in Columbus, Georgia, Warner Robins, and also down in my area, the Mighty 8th Air Force Museum in Pooler, Georgia. Mr. Speaker, I'll take any questions if there are any.
To your left, Representative Lupton is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any numbers on how much tax funding this could reroute?
It's not about rerouting. It's, for example, if in none of our larger DMOs, cities have a problem, their contract for folks that go out and actually do the right thing with marketing to get folks there. And they do this on a long-term basis. Usually complaints come in from typically smaller cities that might have an explosion of hotels where there may be some potential for abuse. And this goes in front of the committee under DCA that actually hears these.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
To your right, Representative Westbrook is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
I think I saw in this version, there's also some language that I believe is from a bill you had about flexibility that local governments would have to change their DMO. Did that make it in this version?
It is, and again, it shortens the time before a complaint can be heard. And again, our larger cities, yours and mine, there's no issues at all. The issue comes sometimes with smaller cities where there might be an opportunity to divert some of this money away from the other half, if you will, the cities get half, to market what it's supposed to be for tourism that might be diverted into other areas.
Will the gentleman further yield?
Sure.
Does it preserve some flexibility for cities, either large or small, to change their DMO?
It does.
Thank you.
Gentleman has one more question from a military museum, I think, or museum at least. Representative Al Williams is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Absolutely.
I agree with the bill. It does a marvelous job, and certainly we have a museum, the Fort Stewart Museum. But also, is it not true that even though we're a smaller city in Hinesville, Liberty County, that we obey the rules to the dot and make sure that there are no abuses? And as a member of that board, I've never taken a payoff.
And the gentleman so states. Mr. Speaker, I'll ask for your favorable consideration, and I'll yield the well.
That question gives me great confidence in mankind. I can tell you that much. The gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? Hearing none, the previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee's substitute? Hearing none, the committee's substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? Hearing none, the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And Mr. Clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? All members voted. If so, Mr. Clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of Senate Bill 430, the yeas are 169, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 503? 503.
Senate Bill 503 by Senator Harbin of the 16th and others to be titled an act to amend Chapter 7 and Title 33 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to kinds of insurance, limits of risks, and reinsurance so as to exempt rental home marketplace guarantees from the definition of property insurance. This bill having referred to the Committee on Insurance, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Representative Matt Reeves is recognized to present Senate Bill 503. The chairman is recognized.
Thank you, Speaker Burns. Senate Bill 503, as amended in the House Insurance Committee last week, is a consumer protection measure to codify best practices used by short-term rentals like Airbnb or Vrbo to protect homeowners who choose to rent out their properties to guests. It's a National Conference on Insurance Legislators model bill. It had bipartisan support in the Senate with 42 votes, and it codifies the common practice that's already going on in Georgia with the national model statute on point, and it puts guardrails and certainty into our insurance code to continue protecting homeowners who choose to rent out their homes. That is the second and third page of the bill. The remainder of the bill presents our insurance affordability legislation that 170 of us voted on and sent to the Senate. About 95% of that has been put in House Bill 1344 in the Senate. We are sending this back over with that language just for insurance purposes to get the legislation done, and we continue to work on the remaining 5% with the Senate through Senate Bill 462 here in the House. So this is good insurance affordability legislation. I respectfully request your favorable consideration. Glad to yield the well if there are no questions, Mr. Speaker.
We have a question from Representative Park Cannon right behind those flowers. Lady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do you yield?
To the retiring representative, I do.
Thank you. It's just a see you later. Is this a consolidation of 4 other bills?
It is 1344, 1274, 1262, and 1263.
Okay.
As well as 1042. You reminded me there was a judicial security legislation to protect our judges that was put in that also. And that is over in the Senate in 1344, but until we get it back, we thought it was prudent to send it to them with those included.
Thank you. Do you further yield?
Yes.
So let's stick to House Bill 1344. With House Bill 1344 and the added focus on faster claims and stronger oversight, how does this bill actually help homeowners recover after damage?
That is a great question. That is what our insurance affordability legislation did. We're going to save Georgians money and also make sure that our claims are handled more fairly, including claims on Airbnb or Vrbo.
Do you further yield for one more?
Yes, I do.
And how does this impact mental health parity focus?
This does include mental health fine increases, surprise medical billing fine increases, and general fine authority in addition to other fines. Thank you. I yield the well.
Gentleman has no further questions. I think he's yielding the well.
Thank you.
Is any objection to the previous question being ordered? Hearing none, the previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee's substitute? Hearing none, the committee's substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? Hearing none, the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And Mr. Clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? All members voted? If so, Mr. Clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of Senate Bill 503. The yeas are 165, the nays are 2. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Members, we're going to take a further action right here, and I'm going to recognize Representative Richardson for a motion. The gentleman is recognized for a motion. Representative Gary Richardson.
Mr. Speaker, I make a move that we agree to Senate substitute to HB 439.
The gentleman moves the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 439. Mr. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 439 to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 48850 of the official code of Georgia annotated relating to compensation of dealers, reporting and paying tax and reimbursement deduction.
Representative Richardson is recognized to explain the Senate substitute to House Bill 439.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. I come to you with HB 439 LC 474254S. This bill authorized the establishment of a local homeowners incentive adjustment grant fund by cities and counties after approval by local voter referendum. This tool has long been available to the state. This bill is created to provide local communities the ability to voluntarily rebate homestead property using collected taxes that are determined to be more than their budget requires. The local government would spread the funds between homesteads with an equal credit applied to each taxability not to exceed the tax owed. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Representative Whip Park, to your left, right in front of you, is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, I do.
Is it not true that on line 56, this bill states that it is enacted pursuant to Article 7 of the Constitution with respect to the establishment of a mechanism for tax exemptions?
According to Ledge Council, we feel confident that this has the ability to move forward. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And just to clarify, this should be able to move forward with a 2/3 vote. Is that your understanding?
No, sir, that was not my understanding.
Do you know which legislative council provided you that opinion and whether or not they could provide a written opinion?
Stuart Morelli. I don't have his number in front of me. I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Gentleman, yield for another question.
Yes, sir.
Representative Wilkerson, to your left in the back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, I do.
To follow up on the whip's question, I guess the concern is that back in 2000, when the homeowner tax relief grant was passed, I thought that was specifically for this body to give homeowner tax relief, which we've done twice since 2009, so we haven't done it, the other 14 years or so, that we can give that relief. Is it not true that there is some concern about using that at the local level because there are very specific parameters that were done at that time to make sure it was constitutional?
Yes, sir. It was back in the early 2000s when Governor Barnes was here, and it was for the state. But again, according to Ledge Council, we feel confident that we have the ability to do this.
Does the gentleman yield for one more question?
Yes, I do.
So just to make sure I understand, what this would do is it would allow the same taxpayers that came out for 581 that asked for relief to go back to the polls, and the county would have to allocate some money of some sort from some, so basically they could tax apartments or get rid of homeless programs or something like that to use the funds? Because where are these funds coming from?
Well, this funds would come from a growing community that is growing their tax base with industry coming in or other type developments. So it would be excess over the approved budget.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Gentlemen, yield for one more question. Representative Newton, to your right, your extreme right, is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Doesn't it say on line 60, in particular, since we're discussing this and how it's different from some other things, It specifically says, and I'll read, any county or municipality that wishes to establish this local homeowner assistance grant. This is a completely voluntary program. No county is required to do it. Isn't that correct?
No county is required. It's completely voluntary with a voter referendum.
And the county has to decide whether that voter referendum even occurs, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you very much for this attention to
Well, I think the gentleman where this bill may have traveled, I didn't look at that part, but Chairman Blackman from Ways and Means knows a little bit about this subject matter. I'll recognize him for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Isn't it true, Representative Richardson, that this would allow counties on a very limited basis to actually roll back homeowner property tax in the event that they have economic development that pertains to that particular district?
Yes, sir.
And in many instances, that may, in effect, benefit homeowners across the state.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
And again, this is a very scaled-back version that is only mirrors what the state is capable of doing at this current time, and that we've had a number of subject matter experts weigh in, and that this would be something that could be utilized should this measure pass.
Yes, sir. That is the intent.
All right. Thank you for bringing the measure.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Gentleman had one more question, but he's yielded the well. On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 439, all those in favor will vote yes, those opposed will vote no, and Mr. Clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? All members voted. This so, Mr. Clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the yeas are 99, the nays are 64, and the House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 439. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 540.
Senate Bill 540 by Senator Anna DeVarde, the 31st, and others to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 39 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to online internet safety so as to require certain disclosures related to conversational AI services. This bill having referred to the Committee on Technology and Infrastructure Innovation, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by Rules Committee substitute.
Chairman Todd Jones is recognized to present Senate Bill 540. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, just as a reminder, this is on your desk. It's LC 640123S. I appreciate the bipartisan effort in order to basically perfect this bill. For many of you do not know, we have had AI chatbots do a significant amount of maturity over the last year to 2 years. In addition, we expect AI chips to be able to commence true reasoning within the next 6 to 12 months. So it is imperative that we start putting some type of guardrails around how the chatbots are going to interact, not just with adults, but also with minors. I'd like to, if it's okay, take you quickly through this bill because of the importance of it. First and foremost, they're designed to simulate an AI companion chatbot is designed to simulate and sustain human and human-like relationships, and you would see that. They are used in personally retaining information on prior interactions, asking unprompted and unsolicited emotional-based questions, and sustaining an ongoing dialogue. So effectively, the idea is to create a relationship between a human being and an AI chatbot. What an AI chatbot is not, and I think this is imperative, it is not basically a chatbot that's used for business internal purposes. It is not one that's used strictly for customer service purposes. It's not one that is a narrowly defined educational tool. So effectively, we wanted to make sure that we were including those that we believe that adults and minors could be subject to creating a true, or at least feeling like they were creating a true human-type relation. On the adult side, we insist that the chatbot basically disclose from the very beginning that it is a chatbot, and then every 3 hours making sure that that disclosure occurs again. With minors, they get the disclosure at the beginning and then every hour instead of every 3 hours. In terms of if the chatbot company effectively determines that it is a minor and the bill goes through how they will determine that, these are some of the things that they cannot do. And you'll see that lines 91 through 99, but I'll give you just a couple of them. Producing visual material of sexual explicit conduct, generating statements that suggest that the user engaged in sexual conduct, simulating romantic and sexual encounters. So at the end of the day, one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is that the operator is taking reasonable measures to prevent the AI companion chatbot from prompting a minor to return to the companion for emotional support, prompting the minor for excessive praise designed to deepen the emotional attachment, and variable or unpredictable awards intending to increase engagement, effectively putting things out there to increase them in terms of coming back. The operator is responsible for maintaining protocols, especially regarding mental health, and we basically ask them on mental health to be able to send out things like what 988 is and where they can possibly get that support. We also ask that they provide a summary and a report on their website in terms of what are some of the mental health issues that they're finding and then the number of issues that they are finding. Finally, we talk about what the parents can do in terms of managing the screen time, and then definitely making sure that we have what is necessary in terms of the minors' age verification, and then the retention of that data. And I want to thank the committee members for taking some time on this in terms of the timing on that, and you'll see that on lines 148 through 150. Finally, from an enforcement mechanism, the Attorney General is empowered for this, and then in addition to that, the Attorney General also has the opportunity on a first-time violation to provide a cure period, because one of the things we wanted to avoid was a good actor in the chatbot space working well for 24 months, 36 months, suddenly there's one violation, giving the Attorney General the ability to give that one-time cure period for 30 days. Last but not least, many of you have heard that the White House has put out framework on what they believe the AI framework should be for the entire country. I will tell you I am in favor of something like that because we shouldn't have a patchwork of 50 different rules. But that stated, we can't expect necessarily that Congress will move as expeditiously as we would like them to. So we put that the effective date would be July 1 of 2027. This gives Washington, if passed, about a year and 3 months to get it right. If not, we'll come behind that, and this bill would become effective and become a statute in July 1 of 2027. Mr. Speaker, that is the bill, and I'll stand for any questions.
Representative Roman up the center aisle is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Is it not true that these chatbots have now been connected to multiple deaths because they have actually helped people complete suicide around the country?
Yes, it has been, Representative, it has been reported that these chatbots have had at least some level of contribution to that, and you will see inside of the bill how we hope that we are putting strong guidelines and guardrails around prohibiting that here in the state of Georgia.
Representative Sanchez to your right is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for this legislation. I think it's really important that we do this. My question is, I know that this talks about companion chatbots. I know there was some discussion earlier about all AI systems. Is there a reason we narrowed it to companion chatbots only in this bill? Or?
Yeah, Representative, thank you for the question. For us, what we wanted to be able to do was to provide to industry, provide to parents and to minors. We want to be able to provide them a very thin but chatbot-focused, I'll say, legislation to address effectively the question that I just got from the prior representative. But thank you for your question.
Representative Jasmine Clark to your left is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
To follow up on the question that was just asked, would this apply to things like ChatGPT, that where you can actually have a conversation, or if you're on Twitter, Grok?
So, Representative, again, what we want to be able to do is look at lines 16 through 18. If you believe that ChatGPT creates an environment that is designed to sustain human and human-like relationships, then the answer to your question is yes.
Does the gentleman further yield?
Yes.
So I guess my question is not necessarily what I believe, but would the the operators of ChatGPT believe that this bill pertains to them, or again, some of these other AI engines that do form these connections, but they may not market themselves that way.
Yeah, I can't speak for private industry, nor shall I from this well. At the end of the day, I want to let them make their own decision. They will be able to read this bill and make their own determinations if they're going to take the proper safeguards.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is any objection to the previous question being ordered? Hearing none, the previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to withdrawing the committee's substitute? Hearing none, the committee's substitute is withdrawn. Is there any objection to adopting the substitute offered by the Committee on Rules? Hearing none, the Rules Committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? Hearing none, the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And Mr. Clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? If so, Mr. Clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of Senate Bill 540, the yeas are 166 and nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption of Senate Bill 594?
Senate Bill 594 by Senator Bearden, the 30th, to be entitled an act to amend Part 4 of Article 6 of Chapter 9 and Title 16 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to Internet and email fraud so as to establish a criminal offense of digital identity fraud. This bill has been referred to the Committee on Technology and Infrastructure Innovation. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by Rules Committee substitute.
Representative Brad Thomas, Chairman Thomas is recognized to present Senate Bill 594.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. Artificial intelligence is advancing at a pace that our laws just haven't kept up with. SB 594 takes a measured, targeted approach to closing some of the most critical gaps. It addresses election deepfakes with appropriate First Amendment safeguards. It applies only to paid operatives in political campaign arena. You may remember this language. It has passed this chamber twice now as HB 986 and last session as SB 9. It requires transparency in campaign advertising, and it enhances penalties when criminals weaponize AI tools. This bill also creates a new offense of digital identity fraud. If someone uses your name, your image, your likeness on social media to impersonate you without your consent with the intent to deceive, cause harm, or commit fraud, that's now a felony. This isn't hypothetical. Georgians are having their identities stolen and weaponized online right now, and statutes have not kept pace. This provision gives law enforcement and the victims the tools that they need. But I also want to focus on what I believe is the most urgent addition to this bill, and that's the prohibition on AI-generated sexual explicit materials. This language has passed this chamber also 2 times over the years. Today, under existing Georgia law, our ability to prosecute these materials depends on the depiction of a real child. Artificial intelligence has changed that equation. These tools can now generate real, obscene images of children, images indistinguishable from the photographs of actual victims without a single child being involved. This is a gap in our law that we can't afford to leave open. The use of actual images of our children to create these images with the intent to lure disturbed individuals to the dark web that actually do feature images of real children. It makes knowing distribution, solicitation, or possession with the intent to distribute AI-generated CSAM materials a felony carrying 1 to 15 years. It requires a mandatory reporting to NCMEC and the GBI, and it exempts law enforcement so they can investigate and prosecute these cases without legal ambiguity. SB 594 closes that gap. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll take questions.
The gentleman has several questions. Representative Berry, to your left, is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
I have a question about the time limit on election material. It's 90 days, but if someone makes a mugshot of me in 91 days, why the time limit? Why are we allowing materials before 90 days and not after the 90 days?
I appreciate that question. It's come up pretty much every time I presented it in the well. It has to do with the fact that we have to make sure that we are very explicit on tying this to a campaign and to make sure that we don't infringe upon anybody's First Amendment rights.
So the gentleman further yield?
Yeah, sure.
So within that 90 days, if a candidate is found to be found guilty of that, is there a penalty for getting them off the ballot, or will they remain on the ballot for people to vote for them?
So the process it first goes to the elections board, who looks at that, and then at that point it would go to the Attorney General's office or one of the local Attorney Generals. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Gisler, to your right, is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
So I was looking at the original version of this bill, which I think is in section 3.2 of the substitute. Is that correct?
Just tell me the line number you want me to look at, and I'll look at it.
Well, they're different line numbers. The original bill, I'll get to my question. The original bill had provisions in it for the part about impersonating someone's identity. It had provisions that allow or required operators to remove that content if they're served notice by law enforcement, and then it allowed a provision for basically someone to sue if that isn't done. But those seem to be missing from the current version. I was wondering if you could explain that.
Well, like I said, without you providing me a reference in the lines, it's a 12-page bill, so it would help me out here a little bit.
Sure. The parts I'm asking about are lines 43 through 57 in the original bill. They're not in this sub.
I tell you, out of respect for time, is there any chance, since you are one of my seatmates, we can just sit down and
sure.
find this?
It was intended to be a friendly question anyway, but sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Koye, to your left, is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yeah, of course.
If I hear you correctly, an infringement will have to go to the elections. You said the election board, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
They'll conduct an investigation and send a referral to the Attorney General or the venue, whoever has venue.
So if that board is partisan, that might present a problem. But
Well,
thank you, though.
I guess that's more of a statement, but my answer to that is actually, I think the concern is I guess my general belief has always been the best thing to do is always decentralize decision making when you can. And in this case, instead of having an attorney general that can decide this, we have an investigative process that's in place that's fair and transparent for everyone. And I think that was the intent putting that in. And by the way, just so you know, this bill went through committee, the tech committee. It's passed out unanimously every time, and that's always had bipartisan support.
Representative Rice to your left is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Is it not true that this bill ensures AI-generated explicit images of minors is treated as a serious criminal offense?
It's true. It does do that, and it should be treated that way. Thank you.
Representative Moore to your left is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Can you tell me, this would be a felony with a 15-year sentence. It's almost a mandatory minimum. Why would it be so egregious in sentencing for an AI image?
You'd have to tell me which part you're talking about specifically. Are talking about the child sexual explicit material, or are we talking about the election deepfake?
Well, that would be covered under another law, not AI generated of a person who would, in this chamber, who would be running for an elected office to whom the the elections board would govern. What we're saying is that the government, I'm not the government, we are the government. What we're saying here is that the elections office would govern over this, and they would be the ones to make the decision that would turn this into a felony?
Well, actually, first offense is actually a misdemeanor, just so you know. It's first offense misdemeanor, second offense felony.
So let me just ask this question.
Okay.
Is the election board going to govern over a sexually explicit piece of material?
No, ma'am. This is different sections of the bill. So that particular bill that you're talking about is the election deepfake portion of this bill. And in that case, it would go to the elections board because it's an election process. If someone was found, assuming they went through the whole process, a first offense is a misdemeanor, a second offense is a felony. That's for the elections board piece of this.
Even in a sexual crime?
No, those are prosecuted completely different. I realize they're all in the same bill, but they're all in the same subject arena, so they do different things.
That's misconstrued here, and I'm having a hard time understanding.
Okay.
Are we talking about elections? Are we talking about deep fake on an elected official or someone running for elections? Are we talking about 15-year mandatory minimums? We're talking about ruining someone's life? Which one? Is this all in the same bill?
I would say
if
you make AI child sexually explicit material, because there are little ears in the room.
Does the gentleman yield for one more question from me?
Sure.
I'm trying to understand this because it doesn't make much sense to me.
Lady, have a question.
Even if I did a deep fake, why would we let the elections board take over a sexual case?
That's what I'm trying to explain to you. You're commingling two things that are actually different subjects within the same bill. And it's not uncommon for sometimes to have more than one thing placed into one bill together. So I think the only thing I could do to answer the lady's question is to reassure you that the elections board has nothing to do with sexually explicit material, and it actually has reporting requirements. It actually has reporting requirements that address that particular issue. And I can find it for you real quick if you'd like me to.
Yes, I would.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Representative Santos to your right is recognized for a question. And then you have a couple more, and that's it.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
This bill covers both election-related AI deception and serious criminal protections for minors. Why were these distinct policy areas not separated to allow each to be fully debated on its own merit?
No, that's a great question. Thank you. They actually have been individually debated on their own merit. That's kind of why I brought that up earlier. The deepfake election bill has been debated on this floor twice. The child sexual explicit material bill has been debated on this floor twice, and both times it's passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. So thank you. And then by the way, the common topic matter here is the fact that they all deal with artificial intelligence. So thank you for your question.
Representative Jones to your right, to your far right is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Oh, yes, I do.
Just for clarity, for elections deepfake, isn't it true that that person would have to answer initially to the elections board, and for child exploitation, that bad actor would have to answer to the DA?
Yeah, that is correct, and it also mentions in lines 231 through 233, specifically the Georgia Bureau of Investigation for reporting a National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So that's specifically laid out in this bill. It is clearly defined. Thank you, Mr.
sir.
Chairman.
Representative Lisa Campbell, to your left, is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Thank you. I just want to ask a point of clarity. In Section 2-4, specific to the campaign advertising, the definition of AI-generated media describes that it would be a depiction of a real individual's speech or conduct that did not occur in reality.
Correct.
And appears to be reasonable. This could apply to an individual who is a candidate, or to an opponent, or to just any elected official running for office. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, restate that one more time.
The definition of AI-generated media just defines it as imagery that is created through the use of AI that depicts a real individual's speech or conduct that did not occur in reality and appears to be real, authentic to a reasonable observer. And in this definition, this would apply a little bit further down in Article 5 to anyone. It could be your own content as a candidate or an elected official, your opponent, or any other person running for office. Is that correct?
I think there's a touch of a non sequitur in there. And the only reason you're pulling in a definition, this is the definition of AI-generated media.
Correct.
But the application that you're talking about is actually listed as a person means an employee, staff member, or otherly similarly paid affiliated individual of a political party, political body, candidate, committee, blah, and it goes on. And those are on lines 37 through 39. But the actual law that they would be breaking is defined further in 21.5, where it says that notwithstanding prohibitions, any person may use AI-generated content in any campaign advertisement, so as long as the campaign advertisement discloses that AI was used to make this.
So just in practical terms, anyone in this body or any other government body in the state can use AI for their own, to demonstrate things they personally didn't say or their opponent didn't say, and that's legal as long as it is disclosed.
That's correct. And okay. One of the things that we did do is just tighten it up a little bit. It just needs to say this was AI-generated content. That's it. And that there's no intent to deceive if you have a flag on it that says this is AI-generated content. I think that makes it pretty clear to our constituents, and I think transparency in campaigns is something we can all fight for. So thank you for the question.
I agree. Thank you.
Gentlemen, further yield?
No, Mr. Speaker, I think I've answered plenty of questions. With that, I'm going to yield the well.
Gentlemen, yield as well. We do have a speaker on the bill. I'm going to recognize Chairman Tyler Paul Smith for some comments in favor of Senate Bill 594. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'll be brief. I want to thank Chairman Thomas. He has been a tireless advocate on trying to be on the forefront of this, and thankfully, before it's too late, we've been able to get this legislation before each and every one of you. There seems to be a lot of consternation in this session about court challenges. And I'm going to submit to each and every one of you, if we let that worry overcome us, we would never pass a single change to our state code. Part of the reason that Senator Bearden and I were both involved in this legislation is because we've had a case that has come up in our actual districts. And what I will submit to you is this. This is a bill that is best understood as a targeted criminal ban on social media impersonation of Georgia residents. If you've been paying attention to anything across the country, I'll particularly guide you to testimony before the United States Congress. A gentleman testified there that he had received an AI-generated phone call that sounded exactly like his son. And the fact pattern was basically leading to them trying to get money out of him. We talk a lot about protecting our elders and those that are the most vulnerable against us. You look at who will be preyed upon if we do not rein this in, you're looking at the elders being hit first. Those that we all get phone calls from, how do I get off of this solicitation list? People keep calling me, I've told them to take me off. And they'll call you and I. My grandparents, while they were still alive, they'd call and ask me what the legitimacy of this phone call was. Think about that. You get a phone call with your child's voice on the other line that someone in the most devious and disheartened manner has decided to generate with AI. Or heaven forbid, you get a video as AI progresses that shows a very, very realistic depiction. Chaos will ensue. I will submit to you that, yes, I'm sure someone will challenge this. I have no doubt in my mind. But ladies and gentlemen, this being such a fire-tested piece of legislative drafting that I believe Chairman Thomas has been working on for well over 3 sessions now, it is time we protect the citizens of this state from this ever-growing and evolving machine that if we don't put guardrails up on, we will woe the day that we fail to act. With that, Mr. Speaker, I hope that brings some clarity to this great House, and I ask that every member join me in favorable consideration of this bill.
I'm going to give the next speaker some extraordinary consideration here and her speak in opposition to the bill. Representative Jasmine Clark is recognized to speak to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do appreciate the consideration. I rise today to explain why I cannot vote for this legislation. And I want to start off by saying I actually agree with 75% of what is in this bill. And if it were presented to me as separate bills, most of these would get a yes vote from me. But I'm really, really concerned about the first part of this bill where we create a window where someone cannot use a deep fake against you as if the internet is not forever. Let's be honest. Someone could make an AI deep fake and upload it 91 days before an election, and it will run through the duration of the election. They could make it 95 days or 100 days. I think it is very difficult for me to grasp that elections only happen in a 90-day period. I have seen elections go on for a very long time. There are people in this room that have been running for office way longer than 90 days for the primary election. And so I'm just very concerned about that one particular piece. This has always been my concern about this bill. I've registered that in the past, but I want to go on record. I am specifically opposed to the first part of this bill, and if this part were not in the bill, I would be a yes, but today I will be voting no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ladies, yield to the will. I appreciate your viewpoint. We're going to let you fix this when you get to Washington for all 50 states. That completes our comments on Senate Bill 594. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? Hearing none, the previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to withdrawing the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is withdrawn. Is there any objection to adopting the substitute offered by the Committee on Rules? Hearing none, the Rules Committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? Hearing none, the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And Mr. Clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? What purpose is Representative Wade rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
State
Speaker.
your inquiry, sir.
Mr. Speaker, is it not true that I've had the opportunity to work with a great representative from District 21 on this important issue? Because I have 2 children, and I actually, as a parent, 2 years ago dealt with an almost reconfiguration of my daughter's picture, and that I was fortunate enough to be a dad who was paying attention at the time and was able to prevent that error from potentially damaging her, and it could have also impacted other friends in a negative manner, sir. Is that not true?
I'm sure that's true. I know the gentleman knows of what he speaks, and thanks for being a good father. For what purposes Whip Park, rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry, sir.
Mr. Speaker, do you think that the Senate is not taking this up because they may want to continue to engage in deep fakes?
Whip Park, I'm doing everything I can to pass some bipartisan bills over in the Senate, and I don't think I'll answer that one, but I'm sure the gentleman believes in what he speaks. Thank you for the inquiry. All members now voted this so. Clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of Senate Bill 594, the yeas are 159, the nays are 6. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed. For what purposes Representative Carmen Rice rise?
To make a motion.
State your motion, ma'am.
I would like to make a motion to recommit Senate Bill 475 back to rules.
That's certainly a motion we can consider. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption?
Senate Bill 475 by Senator Kemp, the 38th to be titled an act to amend Code Section 22, 2068.1 relating to charter school funding.
On the lady's motion that Senate Bill 475 be recommitted to the rules, be withdrawn from the calendar and recommitted to the Rules Committee. Is there objection? Hearing none is so ordered. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 566?
Senate Bill 566 by Senator Huffstetler, the 52nd to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to ad valorem taxation of property so as to provide for the acceptance of tax digests in the event of a publication error made by a newspaper. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Ways and Means, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Representative Shaw Blackman is recognized to present Senate Bill 566. Representative Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fellow members, bring before you Senate Bill 566, which mirrors pretty closely what we sent over there in HB 275. I think you received unanimous approval from this body. It is language brought to us by the Georgia Association of Assessing Officials and ACCG. It cleans up some homestead language. It also provides the framework for a new assessment notice, one of the most taxpayer-friendly documents I think we've been able to push out. It is supported by all the cities and the counties and the schools. And Mr. Speaker, I'd just ask for this body's favorable consideration. Be happy to try to answer any questions pertaining to the bill if
Gentleman yield. Whip Park, right down in front of you, has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the chairman yield?
Yes, sir, of course.
Chairman Blackman, is it not true that I greatly appreciate your hard work, and I look forward to voting yes for a bill that GMA, ACCG, and the school boards all support?
It's amazing that we can sit here and say that. And I've been able to say that about a piece of legislation that I am carrying. But yes, sir, it is true. Thank you very much. Thank you for your support.
Love it when we all work together, especially those folks out in the countryside, right? Gentleman has no further questions.
All right, I yield the well. Thank you.
Gentlemen, is yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? Hearing none, the previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? Hearing none, the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. Those opposed will vote no. And Mr. Clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? All members voted. If so, Mr. Clerk will lock the machine on the passage of Senate Bill 566. The yeas are 161, the nays are 0. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 472, 472?
Senate Bill 472 by Senator Hickman of the 4th and others to be titled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to elementary and secondary education so as to provide for the suspension of members of local boards of education following certain audit findings or findings by the state auditor of financial mismanagement or misconduct. This bill has been referred to the Committee on Education. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Representative Will Wade is recognized to speak to Senate Bill 472 to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I rise to present to you Senate Bill 472, and it should be in your folders. It's LC 492813S. This is a companion bill. Many of you remember House Bill 1164. This continues the efforts of ensuring transparency and accountability within state funds that serves the students across our state and our local school systems. This is about enhancing transparency and accountability. Senate Bill 472 protects students and families by holding local school districts accountable for financial mismanagement. This legislation strengthens our Department of Accounts and Audits. It also gives tools local systems by identifying early issues and creating a statewide fiscal monitoring intervention system, which is what House Bill 1164 laid out. Again, this will clarify that the school board members who are serving at the time of the school board that was subject to the finding of a loss of accreditation as well as financial mismanagement would be potentially at risk of losing their board membership. This is only for those school systems that are in the high-risk fiscal designation. And the way I say it in North Georgia means you got to be in the ditch and put yourself in the ditch knowing you put yourself in the ditch. You've really got to make a mistake to end up in this situation. And you cannot just plead ignorance. You're a school board member. It's your job, in my view, to make sure that you know the finances of your district and how those monies are being spent. Number two, this local superintendent could potentially be suspended if you are a superintendent that has failed to have your school system audited. It's your job to ensure that the monies that local people pay you and you fund your school system as well as the state through our QBE formula that we have fully funded many, many years in a row now, that those dollars are utilized properly. Starting July of 2026, any new contracts for school superintendents would have provisions to address that situation only again in the egregious situation of high-risk fiscal mismanagement. This also limits an advance of distribution of state education funds, potentially that could be used as a part of a corrective action plan. And I'll also point out, Mr. Speaker and colleagues, this will have a petition for local consolidation of independent and county school systems, which is in Section 4. Enter operations after a majority vote, so you still have to have a majority vote within that jurisdiction. And then verse 7, there's a creation of statewide fiscal monitoring intervention system to allow for what the State Board of Education will continue to do, which is update their audit committee and have a minimum of 6 audits per year. And it will give the state auditor a somewhat of expanded investigation authority to ensure that they address any irregularities, governance concerns, and if there is actual true evidence of misconduct. Then this obviously would take effect upon the signature of the governor. I'm happy to yield for any questions, Mr. Speaker. I know there's some folks that signed up that have some objection to the bill, but I'm happy to hopefully address some of their concerns at this time.
You have some folks who want to ask you a question, and then we do have speakers, so let's give you a couple of questions. Representative Carter, to your left, is recognized for a question. Representative Doreen Carter, way back to your left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, to my friend and Education Committee colleague.
Okay, thank you. So indulge me a little bit because I think we addressed this, but I just want to make sure that we're clear. I understand what we're doing as far as the superintendents in the school district, but clarify for me the monitoring from the auditors. What will, if a school district misses an audit, how is that communicated, and what responsibility does the state auditors have in making sure that there's notification?
Yeah, so in House Bill 1164, that laid out the time frames. Typically, there would be thresholds of between 30, 60, and 90-day triggers. It would also ensure that there's communication between state agencies, so as we address these issues honestly before they become major, right? The whole point is to have the audits completed. What we tried to fix in the House bill that has already been passed and sent to the governor ensures that if you're using a third-party auditor that is not the Department of Audits, they follow the same standards that the Department of Audits lays out, and they now have to submit that to the Departments of Audits for review and approval. If that triggers concerns, or quite frankly, they leave out certain components of the audit function, the auditor would immediately know, and then they would have the authority to go in and address those situations. Having a plan to first give a corrective action plan, to give them an opportunity to cure those issues, very similar to me in the banking industry. There are situations in which our state faced the great fiscal crisis. Many financial institutions went under MOUs. It's a very similar process to address those concerns. And I do believe most of our school systems will see this as a net benefit in the long run.
Speaker Pro Tem Jan Jones is recognized for a question. If the gentleman will yield.
Thank you. Does the gentleman yield?
I certainly do.
Thank you. Is it not true that Senate Bill 472 protects students and taxpayers by demanding accountability and increased transparency so that hopefully we will avoid situations like we've had in the past where there has been a lack of accountability and transparency, and it leads to mismanagement and further problems that sometimes lead to an increased millage rate and disruption for students and staff?
To my colleague that has spent a lifetime and a wonderful, amazing career serving in the benefit of students, you know exactly of what you speak. Thank you.
Representative Beckles to your left, she's standing to your left, is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I certainly do.
You mentioned suspension. Do we have any mechanisms in place for reinstatement if the issues are resolved?
Yeah, so when I said the suspension, it would be a contract. So most school superintendents have a 3-year contract, correct? Or if a school board member is recommended to either be suspended or removed, the State Board of Education, depending on the level of the egregiousness, there could be a corrective action plan that ensures that the board members continue to meet and they meet those objectives, then that suspension could be waived. But in some situations, if they're refusing to do the job that they were elected to do, and I do think there is a conversation worth having related to this. I, as a former school board member that served just shy of 16 years, I knew from day one I could be removed by the governor if our school system failed to meet accreditation standards. I, as a school board member, have much more authority over our budget process and communication and holding our superintendents accountable and our finance directors than I ever had to the teacher in the classroom that affected the outcomes of education performance, which drives your accreditation process. So I think there may be a conversation to change that as a board member removal in the long term. I'd love to have that policy debate. But I think this is high time to ensure that this is a way, and as a former member that swore an oath to protect the children in my district and to ensure our taxpayers had transparency, this is a very fair and I think thoughtful step to ensure that we do that process. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Leader Hughley, right down front, is recognized for a question.
And then, Mr. Speaker, I'd love to make this my last question because I know there's others who want to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I certainly do.
Isn't it true that in my local area we have some great school board members, so I don't really understand what has been happening? Can you bring me up to speed in terms of why we need this, what's happening in our state that precipitates this bill?
Certainly. So through this summer, and there has been notification that there are 41 school systems across our state out of 180 that are not in compliance with the audit standards that are currently in law. Some of those systems had third-party audits that were performed, did not submit them to DOA. Some of them have not had an audit in 2 or 3 years. So we're ensuring that that loophole is closed. That is what this bill seeks to address, and I do think 41 systems out of 180, that is enough for the state to take this type of action. Thank you for the thoughtful question. I appreciate it. Mr. Speaker, I ask for the favorable consideration, and I yield the well.
Gentlemen, this concludes our questions, and the gentleman has yielded the well. We have three of our members that have signed up to speak in opposition to the bill. I'm going to allocate 15 minutes total. It'll start with Representative Lupton, then Representative Wilkerson, and Representative Berry. Now, that'll be between the three of you to allocate that 15 minutes between yourselves. Representative Lupton is recognized to speak to Senate Bill 472. Ladies, recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. SB 472. We had a lot of good discussion about this bill in the House Education Committee. We understand, some of us understand, some of the situations that brought us to this point. However, some of the things that we want to do here that are being said in this bill to correct some of these oversights, I believe are a bit heavy-handed and, if not, reinventing the wheel a little bit. If the state auditor finds that a school or a system is in trouble, it empowers the state Board of Education to recommend that the governor suspend any eligible members of the local BOE or the superintendent with pay. I noticed that in the bill, with pay. Now, of course, I represent DeKalb County. DeKalb County Schools has had more than its fair share of arguments and somewhat and some of our own problems. And we know that the superintendent, in fact, there was discussions in my district about, hey, how are we going to get rid of our superintendent? There were some legal issues with our superintendent, and people started talking about, well, you know, the governor can come in and remove the superintendent. That's already there. That's a punishment that can already be at hand. But it's interesting that we are giving the state BOE the prerogative to come in, remove a superintendent or a school board member, and this local district still has to pay them, even though the local elected officials have not chosen to suspend a superintendent, even though they can do their own suspensions. If you look at lines 432 through 438, right at the very end of this bill, it's a mirror language of what's right above it in the bill, but I believe it's entirely too broad. It says, if there are circumstances or information that indicate mismanagement or misconduct on the part of any official or employee of a school system during either a past or present administration, a state auditor has a duty to make a full investigation. That sounds pretty broad. The situation that's happened in DeKalb County has been rather duly dealt with by the elected officials that were elected in the local, in our district. They took care of the superintendent, they put him on suspension, they looked into whatever financial mismanagement may have happened. They determined that nothing untoward happened, but they made sure that they fired the superintendent without paying, with maybe 30 days of pay. That was it. They dealt with it very quickly. It was a local issue. The state did not need to get involved. I think that's local government doing its job. Now, if local government is, for whatever reason, not doing its audits, the state, I believe, has a clear view of what's happening there and can step in and say, hey, do your audit. Do your audit. There's another piece of language that's kind of stuck in here. It was also stuck in another bill that we're not terribly fond of. It includes language that lowers the threshold of registered voters needed to trigger a vote to dissolve an independent school system. It takes that from 25% of registered voters in that district to 10%. Now, we've got districts of all sorts of different sizes. And if we're talking about registered voters within a school district, I don't know what we're looking at, but if we're looking at districts that only have about 5,000 students in them to begin with, you're looking at less than 500 people can put a ballot initiative on the ballot. They can do that every year if they want. The law says no sooner than 12 months, but they could do that. We have a high standard for putting things on a ballot in Georgia, and I think we have good reason for doing that, because we know we could take a lot of things to the voters, but we set ourselves a high standard to make sure that what we're discussing needs to be met as a concern by a lot of people. 10% is not a lot of people to get something on the ballot. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to cede some of the rest of my time to my better spoken colleague. Is it going to be you, David? David Wilkerson. Thank you very much.
Don't sell yourself short. You're pretty well spoken. Yeah, that too. Representative Wilkerson is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I come to oppose Senate Bill 472. I'm going to be brief because we have another speaker, but really the bottom line is this is creating more government to solve ineffective government. In March, we got a report that tells us exactly how these school systems are doing, exactly, so there's no misunderstanding that 6 districts have not turned in any financial data for 23-24. We know who those are. We can easily do that. Back earlier, recently, we passed a bill because we need more CPAs in these communities. If you go to some communities, the person keeping the books could be someone that worked in the cafeteria for a number of years, is very good at keeping home finances, and so now they're keeping the books for the school. So you don't have necessarily the support or the expertise you need in these communities. You don't have the audit firms in these communities. And so what we can do, instead of scapegoating people, we need to provide support from the state level. And how do we do that? That's the question that we need to determine, is how do we help these local districts versus scapegoating them? The piece that primarily concerns me is the removal of school board members. Our laws in Georgia do not allow school board members to be as effective as they can be. So I know there has been a situation where school board members have been removed, but you may have 2 school board members. That would be similar to, we have some bills that are completely bipartisan. We have some bills that are one-sided versus the other. That would be like coming in here and saying, because you passed vouchers, we got to remove everybody. When in effect, you have some people that may be sounding the alarm in these local districts. They are saying something is wrong here, something is wrong here, and those school board members are being silenced. We've seen that in some of my local district where 3 of the school board members are outweighed by the other 4, and they have raised alarms, but because they are in the minority, they never get a decision. If the governor comes in and removes, the governor is going to remove whoever they want. And a lot of times that does not turn out well for people that look like people in my community. They're going to remove people that they may not have connection to. So I'm asking you to not create more government, not create another system that is not going to be effective, and to provide support to these local communities, because we know from the report who these troubled systems are, and that we need to go down there and make sure that those families are being taken care of, and not pass another bill when we just passed one to deal with audits that will just duplicate what we have. But I'm going to yield my time to my colleague. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield the well.
Gentleman yielded well. Representative Berry is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise also today in opposition to Senate Bill 472. I guess we're one of the last parties that actually believes in local control here. Because now I've heard it said this bill is about accountability, and that sounds good, it polls well, but when you slow it down and take a closer look, that's not really what this is about. So I want to ask a simple question. Who is this for? Because if this is about a specific situation, if there's a specific district, a specific issue, a specific breakdown, then we have a process for that. It's called local legislation. We can be targeted. We can be thoughtful. We can address the problem without rewriting the rules for the entire state. In Georgia, we elect our local school boards for a reason. Parents, grandparents, neighbors, they choose the people they trust to run their schools. And if those leaders fall short, the people already have the power to hold them accountable at the ballot box. That's how democracy is supposed to work. But this bill says, hold on, we don't quite trust that. It says the state should be able to step in, suspend elected leaders, and take control when it decides something isn't right. And that may sound reasonable at first, but here's the problem. It doesn't stop there. Because once you open that door, it does not close easily. Today is financial audits, tomorrow it could be curriculum, next year it could be staffing decisions. That's how a system built on local control slowly becomes one control from the top down. When the state steps in, it doesn't step in everywhere equally. Historically, it steps into communities that are already under pressure. Often black communities, often low-income districts, often places that have been underfunded for years. So instead of fixing the root problem, we end up punishing the symptoms. So let's talk about the funding piece of this bill, because it puts limits on how school districts can access their funding early. And that sounds technical, but here's what it means in plain English. Schools have less flexibility to manage their money. And when you tighten the budget like that, it doesn't hit everybody the same. The folks in central offices making six figures, they're gonna be just fine. But the classroom, that's where the pressure shows up. That's the teacher who doesn't get extra support. That's the bus driver working longer hours. That's the student who needs a tutor but cannot get one. And let me say this as clear as I can. If you want to help a struggling school, you don't start by taking away local leadership. You start by giving them the resources to succeed. If you want accountability, you don't centralize power, you strengthen the community. And if you think you can improve education by squeezing school budgets, well, that dog just won't hunt. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about us. It's about the students we represent. They don't care about audits and authority structures. They care about whether they have a good teacher, a safer classroom, and a fair shot at success. So let's not overcomplicate it. Let's not overreach, y'all. Let's not call it about accountability, when especially when it looks like a whole lot more of government control. I urge a no vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Gentlemen, it's yielded the well. That completes that portion of the 15 minutes that those opposed to the bill were allocated. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? Hearing none, the previous question is ordered. We do have a minority report. The minority report will have up to 20 minutes. We will recognize Representative Carlton Howard to take as much of that 20 minutes or as little, whatever the gentleman desires. Representative Howard is recognized to speak. Give the gentleman your attention, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. We often talk about unintended consequences. This bill today is a bad bill that has negative intended consequences. And I would like to ask this body, this chamber, to think about real carefully what we're about to do with this bill. What we're asking now is we're asking us to vote and give the governor of Georgia, who is a statewide elected official, who is a partisan official, we're asking us to give him the power to suspend and effectively remove members of a locally elected school board member based on the findings of an unelected state auditor. We're not asking for a criminal conviction. We're not asking, there's no formal charges. There's no conviction by a jury, no vote of the people who elected those board members in the first place. It's just a recommendation from the state auditor, a hearing before the State Board of Education, and then the governor's discretion to act. In essence, what we're saying, we're taking the report from a minor auditor, his findings, and that should not become a major takeover of a school board. I want to be clear about my objection to this bill. That is the executive branch of the state government reaching into local communities, removing local officials that those communities elected themselves. And I think this body, we ought to be uncomfortable when we do things like that. And we're seeing it more and more where we're getting into the weeds of our local government. Trust me, in my community, the public will act to remove any bad actors, any board officials, any superintendents that are in the wrong and that happen through existing processes. Local school boards are one of the most immediate expressions of what our democratic process looks like. They're our neighbors, they are our friends. Listen, parents and community members who ran for office, they knocked on doors, they earned the trust of the people in their districts, in their communities, and listen, and they ran on the premise that I will take care of your children, I will educate your children, and give them the best resources to be successful. When a school board member is elected, the voters in that community are saying, we trust that person. We trust them to make decisions for us and our children. We're giving them the authority, and if they fail us, we got a right at the next ballot box to vote them out. That is how democracy ought to work, but seemingly it's not working that way in SB 472. Because what this does, it inserts the state into the relationship of the local school board and those who elected them. It says your vote matters, but if the state auditor makes a finding and the governor agrees, your vote can be undone without being asked over again. I don't think that's a small thing. That's a pretty big issue. I think it's a fundamental shift in how we understand local democratic governance in Georgia. Some things ought to stay local. Look at what triggers this suspension. What happens? How does this mechanism get into effect? Under SB 472, a school board member can be suspended if the state auditor designates the school system as requiring the highest level of monitoring or intervention, or if the auditor finds evidence of financial mismanagement or conduct. Notice what's missing. Notice what's missing in the formula here. There's no requirement that the board member personally engage in misconduct. There's no requirement that there are specific decisions caused in the financial problem. There's not even a requirement that they knew about the issue that failed to act. Actually, a board member could have been elected after the problem existed, after the problem began, and the board member could have been actively trying to fix the situation, but yet they can be suspended as well. Under this bill, they can still be suspended because the school system received a bad audit finding and they happen to be sitting on the board at the time. I think what they call that on the streets that's guilt by association. It is not accountability. Actually, it's not real fair justice, and it's not a standard we should be comfortable codifying into the laws of Georgia. Here's another problem with how this bill works. Once a board member is suspended, they have between 30 and 60 days to petition for the reinstatement. But watch this, and when they petition, the burden falls on them. They have to prove that their continued service is more likely than not to help the district improve. The state doesn't have to prove or deserve that they deserve to be removed, but they have to prove that they deserve to be reinstated. That's not how the system should work. Most systems of a democratic society where there's accountability that runs the burdens the other way. We don't ask elected officials, nobody asks me in this House to prove my worthiness to continue serving. That's left up to the voters who makes that decision. SB 472 flips that whole premise, that concept. It makes removal the default and the reinstatement the exception. That is just fundamentally inversion of how we treat democratically elected officials in the state of Georgia. Let me say something directly about which communities this bill will mostly affect. I don't think it's a surprise. The school system that most likely received the adverse findings, the negative consequences of this bill, are the systems that are designated high risk, are those that have been operating with the least amount of resources, more mandates and less resources for the longest time. They are disproportionately systems serving predominantly black and brown students in rural and urban Georgia. Listen, there are these communities that have fought for decades to have their voices heard in a local government, and now we are taking that voice away from them. Communities where school board seats represent hard-won political representation. Communities where elected officials reflect and are accountable to the populations that they serve. SB 470 creates a mechanism that is most likely to be used in exactly those communities, and it does so without offering any additional resources, again, to address the underlying problems of those communities, such as poverty. That is not reform. This bill actually has a tendency or the possibility of being punitive and offers punishment. And it falls hardest on those who can least afford to do it. So, my brother, in closing, Mr. Speaker, if there's genuine financial concern, if there's genuine financial mismanagement in a school district, guess what? Not surprisingly, Georgia law already provides a path to address it. There are laws already on the book. The state auditor has investigative authority. The courts are available. Voters can remove their own representatives. We don't have to need an auditor to decide that. What we do not need and what we should not create is a mechanism for the governor to suspend locally elected officials based on administrative findings, without criminal conviction, without a community vote, and without accountability structures that protect the democratic process of self-governance for local communities. This bill asks us to trade local democratic control for executive branch authority, and today I'm not willing to make that trade, and I urge my colleagues to join me in voting no to SB 472. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the rest of my time to my sweet mate, Representative Shake.
Chair recognizes Representative Dania for the final time for the minority report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Mr. Speaker, I've been in this chamber long enough to know that arguments for expanding state power rarely come dressed up as what they actually are. They come dressed up as accountability, as reform, as protecting public interests, and sometimes those justifications are real. Sometimes the state does need to step in, but sometimes, and I believe this is one of those times, what's being proposed is straightforward state overreach into local authority. And we should call it that, even when it comes wrapped up in language we find appealing. SB 472 contains a provision that should concern every member of this chamber who believe in local control of education. It mandates the specific terms that must appear in every local school superintendent's employment contract in the state of Georgia. That is legislature writing employment contracts for local school systems, and I don't think that's our job. Let me be specific about what we're talking about because the details matter here. Section 2 of SB 472 requires that any superintendent contract entered into or renewed after July 1st, 2026 must include terms making it an act of default, grounds for termination. If the superintendent is found by the state auditor to have engaged in financial mismanagement or misconduct, or if the superintendent knowingly failed to comply with a state intervention plan. Now, I want to be clear. Those are not unreasonable things to want in a superintendent's contract. Most school boards, like mine, would probably include provisions like those on their own. But that's exactly the point. Most school boards would handle this themselves. They don't need the state legislator telling them what to put in their employment agreements. When the state mandates the specific terms of a local employment contract, it is substituted its judgment for the judgment of the local board. It is saying, we don't trust you to manage your own superintendent. We're going to do it for you. That is not a partnership between the state and local schools. That is the state treating local boards as administrative arms of a state bureaucracy. Here's what gets lost when we mandate contract terms for school boards like mine in Gwinnett. Every superintendent relationship is different. Every school district has its own history, its own culture, its own set of challenges. The relationship between a board and a superintendent is one of the most consequential partnerships in local governance. And it requires flexibility, trust, and the ability to negotiate terms that fit the specific situation. A small rural district hiring its first superintendent in a decade has different needs than a large urban district managing a complex multi-school system, which I'm familiar with. A board that's navigating financial recovery needs different contractual tools that one operating in stable conditions. State-mandated contract terms don't account for any of that. They impose a one-size-fits-all framework on situations that are anything but one-size-fits-all. Local boards were elected precisely to exercise this kind of judgment. When we mandate contract language from the state level, we're telling those boards that their judgment isn't trusted. That Gwinnett County schools know better, and I don't think Gwinnett does know better. I don't think that Atlanta does know better. I also want to talk about where this kind of mandate leads, because presidents matter. If the legislator can mandate what must appear in a superintendent's employment contract, what else can they mandate? Can it specify terms of teacher contracts, administrator contracts? Can it dictate performance metrics that must appear in every principal's evaluation? Once we establish that the state can write terms of local employment agreements, there is no logical stopping point. Every future legislator can add new required provisions. Every new political majority can insert its priorities into local contracts. That is not a theoretical concern. That is a natural consequence of accepting the premise that the state has authority over local employment agreements. The better principle, the one this chamber should hold to, is that local school boards have exclusive authority over contracts they negotiate with their employees. The state sets minimum qualifications. The state audit financial practices. But the state does not write the contracts. There is a certain irony worth noting here. SB 472 is, at least in part, a response to concerns about financial mismanagement in local school systems. The argument is that local boards haven't done enough to hold their superintendents accountable. And the response to that concern about local accountability is to remove local authority, to take away from local school boards the flexibility to structure superintendent contracts according to their own judgment. If local boards have been insufficiently accountable, the answer is better tools for local accountability. Not replacing a local judgment with a state mandate. You don't fix a local governance problem by eliminating local governance. And frankly, if a local board is so dysfunctional that it can't write a basic superintendent contract without the legislature's help, mandating contract terms isn't going to fix that dysfunction. It's just going to paper over it while leaving the underlying problem intact. In closing, Madam Speaker, pro tem, I believe in local control, not as a talking point, as a governing principle. The people closest to a problem are generally best positioned to solve it. Communities, given the authority and the resources, can make good decisions for themselves. There's a saying that I'm familiar with. Now who wear shoe, sabi where they pay nam. Now who wear shoe, sabi where they pay nam. Oh, I'm sorry, let me translate. The one who knows where the shoe pinches knows where to fix it. SB 472, Superintendent's contract mandates runs directly counter to that principle. It tells local school boards that they cannot be trusted to negotiate their own employment agreements without the state's legislature's guidance. That's not reform. That's micromanagement, and if we're willing to accept it here, we should be honest with ourselves about what that means for local control as a principle going forward. I urge my colleagues to vote no on SB 472. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. It's now the chairman's time. The chair recognizes Chairman Irwin for the chairman's time.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. Madam Pro Tem, I rise in support of Senate Bill 472. This bill is about accountability in our school systems, and we've heard that word many times. As leaders, we should not shy away from the accountability that the public entrusts in us. When there's serious financial mismanagement, misconduct, and repeated failure, the state cannot simply look the other way. Georgia families expect school leaders to act responsible, protect taxpayers' dollars, and keep the focus where it belongs on students. Senate Bill 472 gives the state stronger tools to step in when local systems are not meeting that responsibility. It creates consequences for mismanagement, adds oversight where it is needed, and helps ensure public education dollars are handled with care. Parents deserve to know that the money intended for the children's education is being managed honestly and effectively. Teachers deserve school systems that are stable, responsible, and focused on supporting the classroom. Students deserve leadership that puts their future ahead of excuses and mismanagement. The legislation is not about punishing schools, it's about protecting students, supporting teachers, and restoring trust in systems that have gone off course. When public confidence is shaken, accountability is the first step towards rebuilding it. Members of this House, I ask for your favorable consideration on Senate Bill 472, and Madam Pro Tem, I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of the bill. The yeas were 96, the nays were 58. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Chair recognizes Representative Rhodes for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 1182 as amended by the House.
Representative Rhodes moves that the House agree to the Senate substitute to HB 1182 as amended by the House. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 1182 by Representative Rhodes, the 124th, and others, to be entitled an act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 12 and Title 2 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to soil amendments so as to provide for additional prohibited acts.
Chair recognizes Representative Rhodes to explain the Senate substitute and the House amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a soil amendment bill that we sent over to the Senate a week or two ago. We had to make a slight change over there to make a waiver that says if the adjoining property owner signs a written agreement that storage could be inside 100 feet. They didn't quite get the language right, and we had to fix it over here. So that's all this bill does, Madam Chair.
Is there any objection to the adoption of the House amendment? The chair hears none, and the House amendment is adopted. On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 1182 as amended by the House, all those in favor will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines.
It's only just now coming out.
Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the yeas were 153, the nays were 0, and the House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 1182 as amended by the House.
It's in the chamber, but going out now.
The House will stand at ease for a couple minutes while another amendment is, two pieces of legislation are handed out. The chair recognizes Representative Reeves for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to agree to the Senate substitute on House Bill 1020.
Representative Reeves moves that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 1020. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 1020 by Representative Reeves and the 99th being entitled an act to amend Chapter 23, Title 47 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated relating the Georgia Judicial Retirement System, so as to provide for the payment of monthly retirement benefits for credible service as a district attorney at the age of 65 years.
The chair recognizes Representative Reeves to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, Pro Tem, and members of the House. I present to you House Bill 1020. This passed the House as the DA's retirement bill with all the requisite retirement issues covered with the state auditor. It went to the Senate, and the Senate added on the DA pay bill, which had made it to the Rules Committee as of crossover day, but like many good bills, we ran out of time that day. So the Senate has sent back House Bill 1020 with the DA pay bill included in it. So this is both a DA retirement and pay bill. The DAs have not received a statutory increase in pay for 11 years, so this is a long time coming. What it does is it mirrors what we did over the last 3 years with our judges. It ties the DA's pay to the federal judges and allows, subject to appropriation, the DAs to get paid 88% of federal judges. It also changes the way supplements are done. There is a figure in there about 10% or $20,000 or so, and then the DAs can also continue receiving drug court supplements of approximately $6,000. So what it does right now, the DA state pay is about $130,000. This will be a significant increase tied to federal judge salary. This will support public safety. This will pay these state judicial circuit officials well, and then the counties can continue to provide funds for assistant DAs, for investigators, and all the other needs of the district attorney's office while increasing our state salary for district attorneys. So I would respectfully request approval of this DA pay and retirement bill to support public safety and give some uniformity around the state, just like we did last year with our Superior Court judges who hear the DA's cases. And I yield for any questions.
Chair recognizes Representative Evans for a question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
My first question is, I was trying to find it, and I couldn't find, when is the opt-in date that we're giving folks?
The Senate moved it from 2034 to 2030. We had done 2034 in the House Judiciary Committee. The Senate did it in 2030, and that's because in this year's budget, the latest version has $175,000. That's a $35,000 to $40,000 increase. And between 2026 and 2027, that is the current opt-in period by 2028. And I would like to emphasize that if a district attorney likes the current locality pay, they can continue with that. They have until 2030 to opt in.
Will you further yield?
I will.
Isn't it true that we do not need a bill to have a DA pay raise? And in fact, even though this bill has a raise in it, it's to go up to $206,000, it is all up to appropriations. There is nothing about this bill that requires us to give the DAs a pay raise. And in fact, the only thing that is required from this bill is that local governments who want to invest in public safety, who want to invest in their elected DAs, will no longer be required to, whether or not we appropriate a raise or not. Isn't that true?
I would point out that from an academic perspective, that may be the case, but the Senate has been pretty firm that we do need to have a change in the statutes. Also, DA pay over the years, in addition to the appropriations process, you've had a statutory process, and because this adopts what we did with the Superior Court judges, albeit 2% lower, this follows a sound framework that was reviewed for 3 years with the judges, an additional year with the DAs, so it combines both our statutory authority and our Appropriations Authority. And I would commend the Appropriations Subcommittee that you're on for working on DA pay, but I would contend the way it's worked forever with DAs, you need both a sound statutory authority and appropriations to do it. Also, this is a long-term thing. The federal judges get raises, so the DAs will not have to come to the Capitol more on the statute because those federal judge pay, that gives more flexibility to the Appropriations Committee.
Will you further yield?
I will.
Isn't it true that even though we are going to suggest that pay raises be tied to the federal judges, just like we did the Superior Court judges, even still, unless and until we appropriate it, it's not a raise? Just like, for example, we said that for the Superior Court judges last year, they are not getting an increase this year. Isn't that true?
Well, I just checked with the chairman of the Subcommittee on Judiciary Appropriations, and both the House and the Senate have given a significant raise to our district attorneys with the expectation this bill will be passed.
District attorneys, but not judges, you would agree?
Well, I'm not as familiar with the judge's appropriation. I've studied the district attorney's appropriation and can confirm the latest number in there is $175,000, which is a $35,000 to $40,000 state raise. And our local officials, they will appreciate that. That is money they will not have to bear.
Will you yield for one more?
Yes.
Isn't it true that because this bill will limit supplements for elected DAs, but won't limit local supplements for ADAs, that's what you said a moment ago, what we are setting up is a scenario where local governments will be free, as they should be, to invest in public safety for ADAs and raise their pay, but not for DAs, so that when there is a vacancy in the circuits where DAs currently get supplements because their local governments have chosen to invest in that public safety, isn't it true that those ADAs who would be the most qualified, that we would want to run for DA to take over those offices, will be financially disincentivized to do so because they will have to take a pay cut to take a higher elevated job, which in metro counties sometimes means running an office of 300 people compared to other counties that might have offices of 20. Isn't that true?
No, that is not the case. I would direct everyone's attention to page 7, section 5. The Senate did add a schedule for ADA pay that was approved by the District Attorneys Association. Over 40 district attorneys have signed their name requesting us to approve this, and even more persuasively, over 40 public defenders have said, please approve this. This will increase the standard of pay for these state judicial circuit officials. And there are 100 ADAs who get paid more than their boss now, and this bill will fix that.
Well, now
There
I have
are
to ask you if
others
you'll
that
yield
would
for
like
one
to
more.
ask questions.
Madam Chair, I would just ask, there was a misrepresentation. I'd really like to ask the speaker to clarify. I don't think he meant to mislead the body.
Final question, please.
Isn't it true that, yes, the budget gives an increase for ADAs, but what this bill will do is limit local supplements for DAs, but not limit local supplements for ADAs. And so local governments will likely continue to supplement ADA pay so that it will go up higher, but the DA pay will not continue to have those same local supplements. Isn't that true?
I think that the locals will appreciate the fact that in Section 5 of this bill, we have increased ADA figures on the state level in addition to the boss, the district attorney, and it gives more uniformity and order to the district attorney and assistant district attorney pay across the state.
The chair recognizes the majority leader for a question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Sir, is it not true that DAs are state officials that deserve a parity pay system across the state similar to the system in which we put in place for judges in legislation last year?
That is exactly true.
And, sir, do you yield for one more question? Is it not true that in preceding years we have increased assistant DA pay year to year over time, but we have not increased the elected DA's pay over that time? And your proposed legislation here is a means by which we can address that disparity that has accrued over time.
That's right. In 2008, Chairman of Judiciary worked hard for a DA pay increase. At that, the Great Recession hit. In 2015, the state of Georgia had a DA pay increase. The DAs have been patient for over a decade now. This bill locks in a sound compensation formula tied to federal judges, that's the top of the legal profession. We're tying our DAs to federal judge pay along with the appropriations process.
Chair recognizes Chairman Parsons for a question.
Thank you, Speaker. The gentleman yield.
I will.
Wisdom and truth, everything you said makes sense to me, but I'm not a lawyer and don't have any question like the previous questions you had. My question is, does the state pay public defenders, and if so, have they had a raise any time in the last few years?
We had testimony from numerous public defenders in House Judiciary that they support this bill. That's because recently, by statute, we have tied the chief public defender's pay to the district attorney's pay, so they like this. This will increase both chief public defender and district attorney pay. They are heavily supportive of it.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Ford for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Is it not true that this bill will be beneficial for rural Georgia, where many areas are considered attorney deserts?
It will, but it'll benefit DAs all across the state, including in South Georgia.
Chair
I yield the well.
Well, the gentleman has yielded the well. On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 1020, all those in favor will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the gentleman's motion, the yeas are 100, the nays are 55, and the House has agreed to the Senate substitute to HB 1020. Senate Bill 587 will be postponed until the next legislative day. Senate Bill 23 will be postponed to the next legislative day. Senate Bill 446 will be postponed until the next legislative day. We're moving on to afternoon orders. The chair recognizes Representative Stinson for an afternoon order. Chair recognizes Chairman Dickey for an afternoon order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to call my House livestock team up. Angie, Bethany, Trey Kelly, Chaz Cannon, I think Teddy Reese is gone. But this team showed, what did we show, cattle? This year down at Perry. We got a great facility at Perry for our young people all across our state to show animals. And thank you for what this body does to support the Perry Agri Center. And this team was not successful this year. The Senate has won this trophy. I had to go steal it from Chairman Goodman's office, but I wanted to let the House know how good these folks showed this year and successful. We're going to get this trophy in the House office next year. Teddy Reese won the grand champion, though, And he had a great animal.
And we all had great kids.
And we had great kids, great young people. So proud of them raising those animals and showing them across our state and in Perry. So thank y'all for what you do, and we're gonna have a winning team next year.
Yes.
Great, go Ag Wheat.
Chair recognizes Representative Stinson for an afternoon order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm inviting other women to please join me. Colleagues, I rise today to recognize a remarkable Georgian, a familiar voice to many across our state, Martha Zoller of Gainesville. As this body knows, Martha suffered a heart attack on February 5th. Thanks to the swift response of her church family, the Hall County Fire Department, and the exceptional team at Northeast Georgia Health System, she received immediate care and began a strong recovery. Today, I'm pleased to share that Martha is not only back at work, but she has embraced this moment as a calling. She is now using her platform to champion heart health, encouraging Georgians to know the signs, take symptoms seriously, and prioritize their well-being. Martha has been a force in Georgia's civic landscape, an author, columnist, former congressional candidate, and the leading voice of North Georgia's most influential news and talk outlets. Her contributions have earned her numerous honors, including being named Woman of the Year in 2024. Martha can be seen weekly on The Georgia Game. The Georgia Game is Fox 5 Atlanta's weekly public affairs program, the longest-running program of its kind in Atlanta. Today, we honor Martha's recovery. We honor Martha's return and her commitment to helping others protect their health. We wish Martha, she's on the screen, we wish Martha continued strength as she carries this message forward of prioritizing your health, paying attention to your body, and taking good care of your heart. So congratulations, Martha Zoller. Today is your day in the Georgia House of Representatives. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, ladies, for joining me.
Chair recognizes Representative Ali for an afternoon order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, on the screen is 13-year-old Alicia and 11-year-old Sean, siblings that are in the foster care system that are looking to be adopted. Both enjoy Taylor Swift's music and Selena Gomez's music. They enjoy watching animated movies by Pixar, including Frozen, Inside Out, and Big Hero 6. And both are amazing at board games, making me afraid to compete against them. However, we can make sure that they are adopted at itsmyturnnow.dhs.georgia.gov. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield the well.
All right, the House needs to recognize two birthdays. Yesterday, everyone give a shout out to Chairman Brian Prince, who had a birthday yesterday. And today, not a better way to celebrate your birthday than for Floor Leader Will Wade. Today is his birthday. We have a couple of announcements. The chair recognizes Chairman McDonald for an announcement.
Intergovernmental Coordination will have a meeting at 1 p.m. tomorrow. That is Thursday, is our first meeting. So it's a day that I'm going to learn how to run intergovernmental coordination. So 1 p.m. in room 341 tomorrow, Thursday.
Chair recognizes Representative Buckner for an announcement.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, even though it's a committee day, will be the last meeting of working families, and they are planning to serve lunch. So if you're here for committee meetings and want lunch, come join us in room 310 of the Legislative Office Building. We'll talk about the good, bad, and ugly. Bills, not people.
Chair recognizes Chairman Gunter for an announcement.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Judiciary will meet in 132 upon adjournment. It may be a short meeting. We have a bill to discuss, so thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Anderson for an announcement.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Governmental Affairs will meet tomorrow at 11 o'clock in room 606. Thank you.
The Majority Leader is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that this House stand adjourned